This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Simon Slater stalking around the background as usual. Hello, Timothy.
Hello, hello, hello.
Have you recovered from your wild last weekend?
Uh, I mean, yeah,
I
I
like the
guess. I mean,
sigh. The
well,
sigh was grand.
it was Monday. I was feeling pretty tired. I mean, we had Rat Bastard and Mike Hoffman here and a bunch of concerts. So it was
Bunch of comics.
Domenica's birthday. It was very, very, very festive. 5 days straight. Walter was in town, so it was
Yeah,
very dense, very dense.
well, I'm just happy to know it was festive, but not as festive as this next story.
Sure.
So a man partied for 4 days while unaware that he had been shot in the head on New Year's Eve. University student Mateus Faccio from Brazil required an emergency operation to remove a bullet fragment from his brain after he initially visited the hospital for unexplained arm spasms. So he was shot in the head, but he thought he was hit with a stone. So he was completely oblivious. I guess he was really partying hardy to his injury, and he carried on like nothing was. He even drove 200 miles to Rio de Janeiro
Oh
to
my
visit a
God.
friend, and then he finally decided to get checked out in the hospital 5 days later, and they found a fragment of a bullet in his head. So I guess nothing went down that hardcore at your
No,
events.
no, no, no,
I
no.
I unfortunately had to miss all of the fun-filled frolics because I'm so busy preparing for all my upcoming tour and had to turn in a book that Mr. Keckler and I are doing for an Australian release as part of the merch table. So
Well, that
I
takes
was a bit
time.
preoccupied. I was a bit
We got to
preoccupied.
we got to hang at the end of it on
Oh
Sunday.
no, we did get to hang, of course. So
And that
I
was
dodged a bullet on that one, I guess.
last night. I played with Sandy Ewan and Brian Chase of Yeah Yeah Yeah. So it kind of continued a little
Oh,
bit,
nice.
but
All right. Very good.
today I got some rehearsals. It keeps on
It,
going.
go,
Um,
it goes on and on and on.
it
I'm
keeps on
telling you.
going. So very mysterious. Well, it wasn't mysterious. It was just bizarre, I should say. Solomon Martinez, 26, Colorado. Cops, he was kind of a suspect of something. But basically, they frisked him. They found a severed human hand in his pocket, wrapped in
What the hell?
plastic. Oh yes, oh
Oh wait,
yes.
plastic or not?
It was wrapped. No, no, it was
Oh,
a real hand. It
it
was
was in a
wrapped.
baggie.
It was like, yeah, it was like in a sandwich bag or something. But
Ouch.
there was a corpse, or basically severed, dismembered, severed head, decapitated head, dismembered body found, and then they kind of looked around, asked questions, blah blah blah, and it led them to Solomon Martinez, and then they found a hand. Who I guess was in his coat pocket for
I mean,
days.
what the hell? I mean, I guess better than dragging a head around with you, but
Yeah, I don't know if that was a trophy. I don't know what he was doing, but
I mean, who dismembered the rest of the body? Him? Where did they
they
find
think
the?
they think it's him. I think they caught him red-handed.
Well, I mean, maybe he could have used a little therapy. And this is just another ridiculous Florida story. A
Yeah,
Florida therapist was arrested after he allegedly shot and killed a man whose body was found in the trunk of his car. Travis McBride, which to me sounds like a killer,
sure.
was accused of shooting Clint Dorsey multiple times in the middle of the street. Court records obtained by Law and Crime state that the witness also saw McBride drag his victim's body into the woods. Now, McBride is a therapist and the owner of Starting Point Mental Health.
Oh
He
boy.
specializes in anger management and post traumatic stress
Of
disorder.
course, of
He
course.
couldn't take his own therapy. So they had known each other, but they had an ongoing dispute. So anger management didn't really work in this case.
No, no, no. He's a hothead. Let's put it that
Well,
way.
yeah, a hothead and he hasn't watched enough forensics to realize a body and trunk, dragging
Yeah,
into the
that
woods.
doesn't really work. So they're
Not
trying
a
to
very good
save. They're
idea.
trying to save. The bodies are just trying to save in general hedgehogs. The population has gone down considerably ever since these
Hey, is it time to rescue a hedgehog?
well
What happened?
these kind of like AI robotic lawnmowers that are
Oh,
just killing tons of these things, and so now in Oxford they're basically making these hedgehog crash test dummies because they have all this new software for the lawnmowers, and so hopefully they're going to save or yeah just prevent
The hedgehog
Yeah, the
extinction.
yeah, exactly, hedgehog extinction. But yeah, those things don't really detect them, and
Hedgehogs they're pretty small, aren't they? They're
yes,
hand-sized.
yeah, I think they're pretty small.
They're
Yes, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you something that isn't small.
Uh oh.
Uh, More than 4,000 earthquakes, yeah, strike the U.S. from New York City to Los Angeles in the last 30 days. What?
Really?
Yeah. Now, okay, a lot of them are just minis, but where do you think
Uh-oh.
most of them happened,
Well, since they were in
Timothy?
the news,
You're very good at guessing games.
since it was in the news here, I think the Northeast near New York.
Well,
Wrong?
you've got the absolute wrong side of the country. Alaska,
Oh, that makes a lot of
Hawaii,
sense.
and Texas.
I thought that was a trick question. That makes sense.
Yeah, not really.
Alaska. I mean, they
But
think the biggest tsunami ever detected, just which was like thousands of years ago, was in Alaska. I mean, Alaska's got a lot of seismic
Alaska has
activity over
a
there.
lot. Well, anyway, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, they said that, and who knew, $14 billion per year of damage in ground shaking earthquakes in the United States. Yeah, it's
Okay.
terrifying. And I guess the safest, some of the safest places are, of course, the strangely enough, Oklahoma has a few too, but um, actually we're in a pretty safe zone because we don't get really big ones
No,
here,
no, no, no. They're minis. They're
So
minis.
I mean, they're okay. So, but based on the data and the update, there is a chance for damaging earthquakes everywhere except the Upper Midwest, Northern Great Lakes, Central and Southern Texas, Central and Southern Florida. Of
Okay.
course, they have their own
Yeah, their
problems,
own problems.
especially in
Exactly.
Texas and Florida. So, I mean, still, the biggest problem is Hawaii and Alaska and Missouri, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Missouri, I mean, Wyoming, Southern Montana, Idaho, California, Nevada, Oregon, and Washington. That's all. Yeah.
Uh,
Well, they've just identified 500 new fault lines in the U.S. that could be a source for damaging earthquakes. So, in the last 200 years, 37 states have seen quakes exceeding a magnitude point, 5, which is pretty high.
yeah.
Anyway, it's yeah, I mean, now I have my obsessions, and now earthquakes around the world is one of them, just
No.
because I'd like to be
Well,
shaken up.
what was the biggest earthquake you've been in?
Oh, minor. I mean, woke me up, put my mirror on the floor, went back to bed, whatever, like a cat who wakes up when something gets.
I've been in a couple, but they're always very small.
Yeah.
Although I was in San Francisco once, and it was a fairly big one, but I was walking on the streets and I didn't feel it, and I felt really gypped. I was like,
I
I was
felt
like,
mini ones in New York, and I felt a mini one in
um,
Barcelona before, but I have a rather sensitive hindquarter.
sure.
Well, not at all. That's a complete lie, but anyway.
If the Midwest is in general pretty safe for earthquakes, definitely wasn't safe for this man. They haven't released his name. He was working in an Ohio steel plant when basically a ton of molten steel was poured all over him.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
it was a malfunction in the gear. It was it was kind of it was being poured into this kind of mold thing, and it basically started pouring before that, and just he was dead instantly. Just poured liquid steel all over him.
Oh, just unbelievably horrifying.
Yes, yes.
I mean, I'm hot enough.
Extreme way
I
to
am
go.
molten. I mean, I feel like molten steel. Please, that's enough.
You
Good
do.
enough for me.
You do. I know you do.
Cool to the touch, but boiling. I'm
Oh, no.
boiling right now. I mean, now that we've gone from 13 degrees wind chill, which I was kind of happy with, up to like a mile 43. I'm like, I got the windows open. I'm boiling. I got no
Oh,
pants on.
last night at Freddy's, it was boiling there. They had it like the heat set up for if it was like
Ugh,
10 degrees out, but it was like
no,
40. So it was
no,
like everyone's like,
no.
oh my God, it's so
Don't
fucking
like
hot
it.
in here.
Not one bit. Not
No,
one
no,
bit.
no, no, no.
Well, I had an exciting event yesterday. I was with
What was that?
Kramer, who's played with, Butthole Surfers,
Yeah,
Ween, so many people,
sure.
and runs Shimmy Disc, been around forever. And he's releasing the last project that Hal Wilner was working on before he died, which is another rendition of the Edgar Allan Poe. By the way, Edgar Allan Poe's 215th birthday, if he was alive, would be this day, this Friday, that the podcast comes out on. And I read this poem called Dreamland. But who was in the studio before me? I didn't get to meet him, but I heard his poem was Eric Mingus, son of Charles Mingus.
Okay, okay.
That was a pretty cool event. So I guess that'll be coming out
Why
soon.
why was Eric Mingus asked to do it? I'm just curious.
Just he's asked a bunch of, weirdos.
Sure, sure.
And, for that fantastic voice he has. I was like, what does Eric Mingus do besides, live up to the legend if possible? And he said, no, he does music and he does some readings and performances. So, okay, there we went. Interesting, since Hal Willner never asked me to do anything when he was alive, yet claimed that he stole all the production ideas from Queen of Siam to produce Marianne Faithfull. And speaking of Marianne Faithfull, any day now, that tribute record to Marianne, who's sadly in hospice, which Shirley Manson, myself, Sylvia Black, any number of other gals have done songs for, will be out very shortly, any day now, the tribute, and we'll be posting information on
So
that.
but what about the that Lou Reed tribute at Lincoln Center with Laurie Anderson? Wasn't that a Hal Willner production, the one that you turned
Oh, it
down?
was, but yes, it was, and that's where he admitted that he stole all my concepts and put them with me. Although I didn't really, the same way I don't see my influence anywhere on this planet yet. So no three-piece female tuba groups.
Well,
but
the rumor with that production or that show, according to Bob Burt, is Adam Horowitz, Ad Rock from the Beastie Boys, was asked to do it. He might have done something ultimately, but he initially said, sure, I'll do a Lou Reed tribute. I want to do the song I Want to Be Black. Laurie Anderson said no, but I thought from a Beastie Boy, that was pretty funny.
Well, I was not on that event. I was on an event which was to celebrate Kevin Friday's 50th birthday, which really Bono, I don't know why, had something to do with.
I remember that, yeah.
So that was a totally different thing anyway. I got nothing more.
I got one story about a creep.
Hey, who you calling a creep?
Yeah, you're not this kind of creep.
Hey. I take,
You're the story first.
I am a creep, but I'm a creep of the highest freaking order.
Well, that's fair. That's fair.
Thank you, Timothy, for recognizing.
A flight attendant was charged for sexual exploitation of a child and child pornography, where, he's been accused of planting a camera in one of the bathrooms of a plane. There was a 14-year-old girl. There's a little line for the bathroom, and he goes, "Oh, no, young lady. Just go ahead right up here to the first class bathroom." She's like, okay. And then she goes in there and she's like, well, wait a second. These kids are pretty tech savvy. She noticed pretty quickly, like, what the fuck? There's a camera in here. So, he was dismissed immediately and it's under investigation.
Well, I mean, it's usually, passengers, not.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's usually, but here's a kind of, I just read a story. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me. So I'm just going to say, there was somebody that had such extreme flatulence, they had to be escorted off a plane recently, and he became very belligerent, needless to say. But you know how you're on a flight, it wasn't even a long one he was on, gas spills up, it may be silent, it's often deadly, but everyone knew who did it, and the guy's just like, hey, stop being rude by calling attention to it. It's like, excuse me, fart man, that's horrendous.
It must have been extreme. I mean,
well, you know what? You know what that's all about after eating a burrito on our way to Australia on a long flight. You had the decency to go take it out of the bathroom.
I mean, with just factually speaking, no, I was vomiting. It wasn't coming out that end. I was vomiting, and that was on the way to Australia, which happens to be the longest fucking flight. So it's like, whoa! It was the first time I've been sick on a plane. And I was like, I can't fucking believe this.
And the thing is, trust the witch. I did try to warn you.
You absolutely did, actually.
I absolutely did. I said, don't do that.
But we had a day off in Brisbane, and it was 24 hours. I healed. Unfortunately, I was going to go snorkeling or maybe even go to the Great Barrier Reef, but I couldn't because I was healing. But I got to hug a koala bear as a result, and so it wasn't all.
Tim, you're very huggable and lovable like a koala bear, I must say. I mean, God. I don't know if you call it sensual harassment, but you cannot enter my house without a hug. You know that. And a song. That. Usually I sing your song. I won't repeat it. No.
Correct.
Come on.
It's a wonderful way to enter your place. I have to.
Thank you very much. It's because I usually kick you in the ass to get you the fuck out of here. But I'm just saying, this is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch. Tim Dahl and the silent Simon Slater. This episode, we're presenting the multi-talented, multi-octave, negroid, gothic, doom spiritualist, as far as music goes, M. Lamar. Very happy to have them on here. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl as always, and the gorgeous M. Lamar, who's an incredible performer, piano player, operatic superstar, artist of all sorts, and is here right now, does installations. I don't know what you down to, baby.
I do a lot of things. I do a lot of things, and so a lot of people don't think that I do anything. Like I think a lot of people are just very confused about why I have a public profile because they don't understand, or maybe they just don't understand what it is that I do. Because it's not exactly meant to be understood. It's meant to be appreciated. I think. Ornette Coleman said this thing about art being it's about it being appreciated, not that it should be consumed or eaten or devoured, but that it should just be appreciated. So I think that that I'm meant to be appreciated.
Half the things I say go over my own head, much less the public pain or not. Now, I love these terms that you coined to basically encapsulate what you do, which is Negro Gothic.
All one word, Negro Gothic.
A rare breed, Negro Gothic. I'll say it again. And also some of the music you do, most of it, doom spiritual, which very much sums up the performances as well, which are just, I mean, that the only equivalent you have in a very different manner, but is Diamanda Gallas, because of the range of your voice, because of the type of performances you're doing, the kind of music you're making, and the subject matter that you're dealing with, which is very heavy and very philosophical.
I mean, that's a great honor. I mean, as you know, Lydia, I'm a super fan of Diamanda Gallas. Like actually, I told you the story when this is one of my most favorite stories of my life. I moved to New York in 2006, and I moved here mostly to work with this voice teacher named Iris Sif. He's a great operatic soprano himself, but he's been teaching voice since the 70s. He taught Klaus Nomi. Klaus Nomi is mostly a self-taught singer.
Taught Klaus Nomi.
Taught Klaus Nomi. I mean, for the most part, Klaus is self-taught, but when he did have lessons and he had training, he went to Ira. If you know the Nomi song, that documentary about, I was very shocked when I was in San Francisco watching the Nomi song. I think we'd rented it maybe from some place called Lost Weekend, maybe a video store, back when they had video stores. And when I was sitting there watching it, because I was, very interested in Klaus Nomi's work, and then my voice teacher just pops up in the middle of the thing talking about, working with Klaus and the nature of Klaus's voice. But I'd already been coming to New York before I moved here to sort of have lessons with him. And my teacher in San Francisco said, you need to move to New York and work with this guy. And so the second week I was in New York, I was going to a lesson with Ira, and I was leaning against an NYU building in the East Village, and I was just sort of doing little scales and things. And this woman walks by and she says, that's a beautiful sound. And I look up and it's Diamanda Gallas. And I say, you're Diamanda Gallas, which is so ridiculous and so kind of embarrassing. That was my response, but I was truly in shock. And that she was of all the ways to meeting her in the manner that she would be commenting on a noise that I was making.
Probably the best way to meet her, actually, because, she can be finicky. That's probably the best way to meet her.
I think so. And it turns out I was singing into her apartment. I had no idea she lived in the East Village on the street that I was leaning up against. I was sort of, my voice teacher was on one, I don't want to say the streets because, we're broadcasting and I don't want people to stop. My voice teacher or Diamanda's old, I don't think she's in that apartment anymore, but her old apartment.
Yeah. Did she ever, was she living in New York at the time? I didn't even realize that.
In 2006, absolutely. From my knowledge, she moved to New York in 1989 and was in New York from 1989 to about 2009.
So anyway, you're on the street just running scales, and there goes Diamanda, as I like to call her, Diamanda.
Diamanda. And we talked, I always say that we talked for about 13 minutes. She was asking about, she was well, you're making the soprano sound, but you're a man. And I was well, yes. And we talked about middle voice and technique. And then she was doing a show at Spiegelton, and she said, I will put you on the list for that show. And then indeed, one of her people emailed me because I had this little CDR of my music, which I'm embarrassingly gave to her, but it had my email address on it. But it's sort of embarrassing to think that she was.
Well, that's what you had to do, though. I mean, it's like the rapper Scarface giving out autograph pictures out of the back of his car. That's what you had to do. Then.
And she actually,
my calling card.
And she actually listened to it. I had like this like version of Bomb and Gilead, the spiritual Bomb and Gilead that I was playing piano. And anyway, and she actually really enjoyed it, which is just one of our favorite songs. Anyway, and so then we talked and she put me on the list, and then we had several more encounters between 2006 and 2008. She performed in New York like constantly. I saw her at Joe's Pub. I saw her at Highland Ballroom. I saw like 3 times at Highland Ballroom. She had 3 shows at Spiegelton, so she put me on the list for one of those shows, and I paid to go see the other 2. So I was just being, after meeting her, I was already a super fan, but then after meeting her, and after she was so gracious and wonderful and fantastic, I would like sort of show up, you know, with flowers at the end of her concerts and like sort of be at the stage like with flowers.
But what's very interesting is this: in that realm, in that genre, which is so unique, there aren't many occupants. I mean, there is Diamanda, who sits on the top as the queen of the diva of all divas. And also, there aren't many both that have that kind of range or that are that concerned with such dark subject matter and that also perform.
It's also very identifiable, yet it's not idiomatic at the same time, which is always interesting when that happens, which I guess you're putting yourself in that category, which is like you're all things, but you're nothing, you know, anti-marketing in a weird way, even though you're selling something as identifiable.
I also liked some of your references. Like I love that you reference, at least in a write-up I was reading about you, Foucault, for instance. I mean, I love that you reference philosophers, which were, of course, very important to my development, especially when you write about prison, the American preoccupation with, you know, the modern day gulag.
Yeah, I mean, the first Foucault I was introduced to because I was a very young homosexual from Alabama. It was a history of sexuality. But it turned out I was much more interested in Madison's Civilization, the birth of the clinic, and Discipline and Punish, the birth of the prison. Those seem to be much more important to me, ultimately, than anything about sexuality. And so, yeah, there was a point when I was making this piece called Surveillance, Punishment, and the Black Psyche, where I was in a very theoretical place about Frantz Fanon's work, you know, stuff like Black Skin, White Mask, where he was dealing with internalized racism from a very psychological standpoint. And then with this Foucault text, with the panopticon that he was sort of talking about in Discipline and Punishing, what is this thing about a self-policing subject? What does it mean to have a subject, you know, because of the way power works, that is policing itself? And what does that have to do with race and white supremacy and all these kinds of things? And I was in this very theoretical place when I was making that piece, and then my co-writer told me about the story of Willie Francis. And Willie Francis is this young black child who in 1947 was executed first. In 1946, they attempted to kill him for killing a white man.
Attempted to execute him.
Attempted to execute him because the electric chair that was traveling around to different southern towns was installed improperly, because allegedly the police officer was drunk when he was installing the electric chair. So he got all these volts of electricity, but it didn't kill him. And he had a lawyer who called no witnesses, who did no cross-examination, a white lawyer who was a court appointed. And so, of course, he was convicted. And so in the year it took him to decide whether they would try to kill him again, because it went to the Supreme Court and they were like, is this cruel and unusual punishment? Should we try to do this again? And of course, they were like, of course we can. Of course we can kill this black child. And so then, you know, in that time, the ACLU goes to talk to him, the NAACP goes to talk to him, and it turns out he was having this sexual relationship with the man that he was alleged to have killed, the 53-year-old shopkeeper. He was a pharmacist. And apparently Willie Francis was like, you know, cleaning and doing this kind of stuff in the pharmacy.
A 15-year-old boy.
15-year-old boy, well, maybe like more like 13, 14 at the time, you know, because, so, you know, obviously this is like, you know, molestation or whatever, but that's not how Willie talked about it. Willie talked about it as our secret. And so I don't want to like impose, you know, from our moral vantage point, some idea of molestation onto
sure.
About it, you know, because I think that, you know, however even though we understand it to be that, how can one consent it? You know, whatever. We understand all these things about consent. But
what state was this in? Lamar, what state did this happen in?
Louisiana, St. Martinsville, Louisiana. In 1946, you know, anyway, so this is just a crazy story. So so I thought like in this story was all the stuff I was trying to sort of deal with Foucault, and with Franz Fanon, and what does this dynamic look like? What did this dynamic look like in 1945, 46, 47? What did it look like in 1847?
Right.
What if we went back to plantation times and with these kinds of interracial homosexual dynamics, and what does it mean if you've been sort of this person who wasn't loved by your Black family, and then this person is coming into your life, touching you in a way that you hadn't been touched before, and appreciating you. I mean, this is all my imagination, by the way. I mean, we only know very
well. Lamar, what about 2007? I mean, there's rumors. I don't know if it's true. Eric Gardner, the cop that strangled Eric Gardner, they were having an affair. I've heard that from a few different people, that basically there was some side action because he was just selling Lucy's.
That was a horrifying thing. But the other thing that's interesting about like the guy who killed George Floyd, if you watch that tape, he's got his hands in his pocket. Chauvin, that's right. He's got his hands in his pockets the entire time. His knee is on his neck. And I'm like, what is he doing? I mean, like other people have talked, is he jerking off? Is like, why is his hand, is it just, he's just chilling and relaxing? I mean, I've been insisting for a really long time that there's a sexual dimension to the murdering of Black people by the police. And it's caught up in the ways in which pornography kind of, perpetuates this plantation fantasy, and that it's been maintained through pornography and through, I guess, stories and mythology and the white imagination.
And then the fear becomes the obsession.
And the fear becomes the obsession, exactly.
Well, and so that the story that we were just previously talking about, that led to one of your performances, the funeral doom spiritual.
Well, no, this is Surveillance, Punishment, Black Psyche, but Funeral Doom came later, which was also about, I mean, that was going more into this whole thing of the just that mourning of the loss of someone who was murdered by police. So there are all of these, the through lines in my work. I mean, the thing that in some ways I'd like to just sort of like maybe go and do something completely different, but the things that obsessed me continue to be things about power and desire, and the psychological dimensions of power and desire when they're internalized. What does it mean to internalize these things as like this person who is allegedly subjugated by power, but then can perpetuate all kinds of horrors any person who is allegedly the victim of patriarchy, white supremacy, capitalism, any of the isms can also perpetuate all of these things. And so I'm always kind of wondering about how all of these things work, and how does power exist within us, and how do we, exert. Anyway, so all these kinds of questions obsess me.
Feeding off of that, the theory of homophobia within the American Black communities. Some people say a lot of the formal sexual experiences are homosexual because a lot of youth are in cages, essentially. And there's a shame association with those power dynamics, mass incarceration. And so there is anger towards homosexuality within the community because it possibly symbolizes mass incarceration and formative sexual experiences in confined spaces.
I mean, I think a lot of it is about the history of emasculation and lynching, right?
Sure.
I mean, we know really intimately that lynchings weren't just about people being hung from trees, but it was also about, dismemberment, toes, fingers were cut off, penises, testicles were cut off during lynching. And there's a kind of a psychological scar that I think that Black men have around that kind of emasculation. I mean, when Dave Chappelle sort of running around, Dave Chappelle and Cat Williams is sort of running around sort of with this like irrational fear of Black men being put in dresses. I think it's about this kind of unresolved or sort of unprocessed trauma around that kind of white supremacist violence. And so I'm sympathetic, even though I'm like, you should unpack your homophobia and transphobia a little bit, more effectively, but I'm sympathetic because it's deep. I mean, it's this is like recent history. This isn't like, 100 years ago. People always like to talk about slavery as 100 years ago. We're talking like 70 years ago.
Modern slavery exists. It just has taken other forms. And the form that it takes, one of the forms it takes, is by isolating people in prison-style ghettos with no food to eat other than at the bodegas or liquor stores. Modern slavery is the minimum wage, if you can even find a job. Modern slavery is still the prejudice that people have. And within all of that slavery that exists, there is a genetic wound on peoples who have been victim of this for centuries. So it hasn't gone away. It just takes now another form. Modern slavery is the modern frickin' gulag. Yeah. These are subjects we are obsessed with because they're not going the frick away.
Unfortunately, they're not. I think that like Marx was just wrong about, capitalism going away, and that the working class would be the ones who like sort of rise up. I mean, I I don't like to tell people this, but I was at Yale, for like a year before I dropped out in graduate school.
And oh, wait a second. Let's just go back before Yale, or you could finish that story, then we'll go back. So first of all, you got into Yale. No easy feat.
In the arts, I guess so. I mean, I guess that's true. I mean, I can't. Sure. But
first of all, how did you get? Let's go back before that, because you and I were both at the San Francisco Art Institute around the same time.
You were teaching and I was a student, but yes, we were there.
Unfortunately, we weren't in the same class, but you were studying painting and sculpture.
Painting and sculpture, but then I started doing a lot of stuff in video performance and with performance and with video. But yeah, my degree is technically still in painting, even though I stopped painting maybe my first 2 or 3 months at the Art Institute because I was more interested in doing other things. But they were very liberal about you having to officially change your major. But yes, we were at the Art Institute together. I worked with Kathy Acker, which is super fun. Love her. R.I.P. to Kathy Acker.
And it's interesting because I taught there because Karen Finley was pregnant, so they called me for some reason, and it was a very unique time in that school because some of the kids, of course, trust fund babies, and others got grants. I had some like Filipino gangbangers in my class. I had very rich, rich kids who never did a day of work, never probably have. I have people that have come like Mary Lynn Reichstock was in my class. You went on to be on the Larry Saunders Show and 24. It was a very unique period in San Francisco. What years were those? Remind me. I know I was there.
I was there. I got there in 1991 and left in 1995. Okay, so yeah, and I think you were there in 93.
Whatever. So anyway, you're there for a few years. Did you start doing, is that when you started doing performances, or had you already performed? I mean, I know you began in the church singing.
I mean, yeah, all of us Black folks
in Mobile, Alabama.
I was not, I'm from Mobile, Alabama, and I was in the choir, but I wasn't like a soloist. I wasn't like a star in the choir or anything. But yeah, no, the first performances I did were sort of castrati performances, ironically. Like I was really interested in the castrati around, it was a Tony Labat class, and I did
Tony Labat, who invited me to teach. Exactly.
Yeah, Tony is brilliant. We love Tony. And so I think I did something where I was like, I was interested in like taping, like taping your genitalia or whatever. So I was naked, because everyone's naked when you're in school and you're in a performance. I was naked and I taped my genitalia down and I started like singing in soprano or something. So I was
pretty amazing. I mean, the castrati always found there's a tragic side because if you were talented, you know this probably better than I do, but if you were talented, that's like a real career and you're going to feed your family and all that stuff. But the ones that thought that was a quick money and they weren't as talented and they went ahead with their child being castrated, that was a fucked up place, and that's all documented. That's
yeah, no, I mean, well, Farinelli, we know, was like the most famous. He was like, I don't know, the Mariah Carey of his time or something. He was like this sort of or like just this like superstar family who was a castrati and was maybe the most famous of the castrati. So yeah, and when I was in art school, I mean, I was obsessed with, like I started reading bell hooks, and so I was like, very interested in like kind of race questions. But then, I was obsessed with opera and listening to a lot of opera singers and getting into the castrati mythology and that sort of thing, and realizing I needed to be like, it was not meant for me to sing in baritone, even though I do dip down there sometimes, but to be singing in soprano.
So as far as I know, what's happening with the anatomy, what's going on with falsetto is it's like in physics, you cut a string in half and it jumps up an octave. So basically, it's like the vocal cords are being pinched like in a half spot. I think that's and the air's being pressed at a different point. And then once you're in falsetto, how do you? It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to kind of callus up and get to be consistent. So
you don't want to callus it up. Like having your vocal cords callous is a bad idea. and so
I'm not talking about nodes, but yes, okay.
But there's a kind of a misnomer that when you're in head voice or falsetto, that the vocal cords aren't fully vibrating, that the whole thing isn't vibrating. And I mean that technically speaking, I mean, in an undeveloped falsetto, like a sort of a weaker sound is just vibrating on the very edge of the vocal cords. But once it's like, incorporated into the full voice, which you can go, and connect those things, then you've got this like balance where the whole thing is working together, and so the whole vocal apparatus is vibrating. You're not just.
I want to go back a little bit. So you're singing in church as a young child in Mobile, Alabama.
Yes.
Then what? Then did you know as a child, like, I have this and I'm going for it? What did you do after church? Okay, you're going to church, you're singing in church. What was the next step in knowing what you were going to become, what you had?
I mean, I think that because I wasn't a soloist in my church choir, I think it was more that I was singing, and I was just obsessed with it. It was more, I heard the call, and it wasn't, I don't think anyone sort of decided, like, some people are like discovered, I wasn't really discovered. I discovered myself, and gave birth to myself. But I mean, from there, I was doing all this art, so at the same time I was like in choir and I was obsessing about like singing. I had this like sort of parallel, like I was a painter. Like I started taking art classes when I was 8 years old at this place called Culture in Black and White. It was this like Saturday art class thing. And so I became very serious at like 8, 9. Like I was like, had this World Book Encyclopedia, and I was obsessing about Gauguin and Matisse, and the Scream, about Munch's The Scream. I mean, I knew that it was in Oslo, Norway. I mean, I was obsessed with like art history. I was obsessed with Rembrandt and Da Vinci. And this is at 8, 9 after these art classes. And so that was kind of like my main identity. And then music was always this thing I was just sort of doing. And this was the thing where I was kind of like, I guess, celebrated or discovered or whatever, because I would like enter all these like blue ribbon things and win them. I was one of those kids who would like win all of them. And so, but then this music was kind of going along at the same time. And so I knew I could get scholarships I actually got a scholarship to go to the Alabama School of Fine Arts for high school. And so I did my high school thing in Birmingham. So I grew up in Mobile and then went to Birmingham and like lived in these dorms and for high school, and was, oh my God.
All right, wait a second. Lived in these dorms for high school.
For high school, yeah. Well, that was like, it was like a public school, but it was a boarding school too, because the ballet program was like sort of world famous, because there was Dame Sonia Areva, this like Russian ballet master who was like, like this big deal. And so all these dancers from all over the world, but in particular all like California, all over the United States, were coming to the Alabama School of Fine Arts because they would like then end up in ABT or New York City Ballet, or I mean, we were kind of funneling young dancers to all those like.
And you were there for painting
I was there for painting, yes.
Wait, when did you start developing your personal style? Because I just want to envision you in a dormitory as a high school character.
Well, no, it was actually when I went away to high school that I like saw all the goths and the punks and like their style, and they were all thrifting. They were all doing all their like getting all their clothes from thrift stores. So I started thrifting in high school and started just getting really, really, really eccentric when I went away, because I was away from my mother and I could just go crazy. So this is like 13, 14, and I was really I remember I had these big polyester. It was like a jumpsuit that was like these big polyester sort of bell bottom things that I wear all the time, that were really, and then there was this kid with a mohawk, and he got his mohawk with toothpaste, and I was like, this is so fascinating. And so I grew my hair out, and I was like, I had a toothpaste like form. And I remember actually this one kid who's like a famous pianist. He said to me, "Why are you?" I mean, he was like a piano player. Actually, we ended up, I almost say we ended up having sex, but he was sort of like, "Why are you so weird? You're not gonna be able to do that in like your real life, like when you grow up." Anyway. And I'm like, what do you look at me? I'm like, that's still really weird. Yeah, I had a toothpaste form. Anyway, I was kind of ridiculous in high school. But yeah, I was wearing crazy, ridiculous stuff, and I was like my apparent homosexuality could just go crazy, but it was really the punks and the goths that like in terms of style that like obsessed me. And I wanted to like sort of dress like.
And were there many around you in Birmingham? I mean, did you find any kind of a scene that you could connect to at that point there? Or did you know, I know they're out there somewhere, I'm going to go find them?
They are, and I did. I mean, it actually was mostly like people who were like a few grades ahead of me. And then one kid who had like graduated, I don't remember, Troy maybe was his name. Anyway, he had graduated, but he was like, would come back and hang out. He was the one who had the toothpaste mohawk. So hot. He was just hot too. So I think I wanted to fuck him. That's the thing with homosexuality. It's like,
you brush your teeth and fuck him at the same time with that toothpaste mohawk.
Yeah, I mean, that was when I became like obsessed with like fucking like punk boys, or smelly punk boys. There was this one time when I was at the Art Institute, there was this like green haired like punk kid, and I was like
a crusty,
way crusty. And I remember telling the story of like, oh yeah, I was sucking his dick and I could smell his ass because it was wasn't clean the ass, but I didn't mind his aromas.
So all right, you
So how did I get from Alabama?
Of the subject matter? When did you take up the piano? So you're in high school for painting because you're already established in that, winning awards. When did you take up the piano?
When I was an undergraduate at San Francisco Art Institute, I started. There was a model. Her name was Liza, who like she was one of the naked models that I was in a drawing class. She just started singing. Like she started with like unleashing this operatic sound, and she was posing, and I was just like, oh my god, I'm so fascinated. And so we kind of became friends, and she started giving me these little voice lessons, like on the side that I would like pay her money or whatever. And then so that was like sort of, I guess, my first kind of classical training was like through her, because the training I've been in before was like more, I guess, gospel, just gospel choirs or whatever. And so I started doing lessons with her, and then Community Music Center in San Francisco on Cap Street. I started taking lessons, piano lessons and voice lessons there when I was an undergraduate. But again, this was like just because I was obsessed with like music, and not because I was going to do anything with it, because I was like, oh, I'm doing this whole art thing and it's going well.
Okay, you're obsessed with music, but what kind of music are you obsessed with? You're sucking green mohawk cock. What kind of music? You're into punk rock, dirty, crusty punk rockers and other weirdos. But you're taking piano lessons and singing opera. So what kind of music, or did you just have such a wide range that first of all came out of gospel, then went further into both into goth, punk, blues, whatever?
So my sister probably was the first one from Mobile Public Library when I was like, in like,
your twin sister?
Middle school. Yeah, my twin sister. She was probably the first one to bring home jazz recordings from the library. Billie Holiday, Cleo Lane, Sarah Vaughan. Oh my God, I love Sarah Vaughan.
By the way, let's give an age check. Your twin sister as Laverne Cox, who's on Orange is the New Black. That's
among many things,
among many other things. We'll get back to her for 1 second in a minute. But so she was going to the library, bringing back these incredible female jazz classics,
jazz singers, and we saw Leontine Price. We both saw her on television on like PBS singing "Un Bel Di" from Madame Butterfly and "Summertime," and we became obsessed with Leontine specifically, but opera in general. And so then, of course, the library had all these recordings of Leontine Price, and so I became obsessed with like opera. Via PBS, via Leontine, and then Jesse Norman. These were like, and then so all through middle school, high school, I was just like, but this wasn't anything I shared with friends. I could share with my sister, and it was like my own private thing. Socially, I was like listening to The Cure and the Smiths and like whatever punk band, like just all the kind of the punk shit or the new wave, whatever, at the time, whatever the music was, whatever the punky new wave.
Oh, I want to ask you, just because this is a question, of course, we've all been asked, and people are now, of course, writing books in retrospect about it. But you are, what is goth to you?
That's complicated, because I talk about Negro Gothic, right? Is something else, but that we can talk about that in a second. And goth to me is really just the aestheticization of chronic depression. Right, but it's the aestheticization of that I think is really important. That people with this kind of chronic depression who were sort of like particularly, I think if you trace in terms of the musical subculture, you think about people like Ian Curtis, people like Susie Sue. They were really interested in David Bowie. They were interested in the literary aspects of David Bowie. And I think when Bauhaus wrote Bela Lugosi's Dead, they were very interested in like these silent films, these like this kind of campy, kind of schlocky horror film aesthetic, and literature. I think Gothic literature, Gothic architecture is very important. It's sort of Victorian thing. This way of aestheticizing a particular kind of way of being in the world, I think is a simple kind of, again, you could write an entire book about it. But then when
excuse me, there are entire books about it that have recently come out.
Yes, there are.
I just want to say one thing about goth, because people ask all the time. It's like, I dressed as goth at 13 in 73 before it was there, whatever.
Yes.
To me, what's interesting about a goth audience, for instance, or even goth music, is that because of the heaviness or darkness, there is underneath or even above all that, a sensitivity that brings this beauty to the aesthetic. Whether it's the literature, the music, or the costuming, and also, you never have to fear. I've never had to experience fear. Of course, I never experience it anyway, but the goth audience is the kindest for some reason. Maybe because they're just the most empathetic to their own, ennui.
So, Em, do you think you can basically just be an optimist and have no relationship with depression and still express the aesthetic of goth?
No. No, I don't. I think
that means Lydia's not a goth.
Well, I never
No.
said I was a freaking goth,
I know.
except I dressed as a goth when I was 13. People like that. Look, I'm not punk. I'm not goth. I'm no wave. I'm no wave.
Fair
Hello,
enough.
that's what I am.
Which is a philosophy. Yeah.
But many people who are goth, I think, were influenced by you. I mean, this my friends who were goth are very influenced by you. And the no wave, but they're also very influenced by no wave. I mean, they're very clear. It was like, you know, your work and the contortions, like that kind of moment, that no wave moment. In terms of the people, because when I went to San Francisco, all the people I lived with all had Lady Lunch posters like on their walls. These are still difference of mine to this day. And these were goths, these were punks. So you know,
those posters are worth $2.50 now. You know.
Are they? They are collector's items now.
I need some of them. Who the fuck knows? Do I care? No. I'm just glad you got to see my face every day when you were fucking some crusty punk.
I did, and I lived with one of my dearest friends to this day, and I won't say their name because I don't, you know, but we lived in a residential hotel called, I think the Ruby Rose. I don't even know if the Ruby Rose is still there, but it's an SRO in San Francisco. And they were like, at the time, they're not doing heroin now, but they were just like not even mainline heroin. You know, the nice heroin acts find a vein and they're very sort of pristine about it. This dear friend of mine would just stab themselves in the arm and then immediately throw up and then just sort of like lie back and just, you know, experience the high. But yeah, this was my friend who had the Lydia Lunch posters. And we would then listen to like Diamanda records. Like we had Diamanda on vinyl, actually.
Well, it makes sense if you're looking at me and listening to Diamanda. That makes a lot. Not saying nothing.
This was my life. This was my life. And
would you say that part of you adopting some of the punk aesthetics, whether it's a mohawk or whatever, was to poach on boys that you got a crush on and to kind of interface with that, or were you actually attracted to that aesthetic?
I mean, it was both. I mean, I think I was attracted to that aesthetic. I was always like just an anti-establishment person. I was always contrary. I was always I've just been drawn to things that were just not about, like, I mean, my sister, for example, is very like not contrary. I mean, she's very like, you know, I mean, and I say this with love because I love her. She's my sister, but she's, you know, corporate. She's like a corporate whore. And which is, you know, it's great for her and great for me sometimes when I can borrow money. But like, so I mean, these are not bad things, but that's just not who I am. I've always been this person who was drawn to things that were like, you know, just outside everything, outside of convention. Just rebellion. Like, I mean, just almost rebellion for rebellion's sake. I'm contrary. I'm a contrary person.
I'm a contrarian all the way.
Contrarian.
Contrarian all the way.
Your sister's a twin, correct?
Yeah, we're twins.
Twins. So just by twins to have that kind of separation, that partition, that means you are definitely contrarian, or your sister's a contrary one, or both.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, just because I think, yeah, we're very different people. I mean, like our like what obsesses us is just very different. I mean, we both love opera. That's what we have in common. Although we haven't been able to talk about it recently, but that's a whole other story. But yeah, I mean, she has a love of Beyonce that I don't share. Like I have no interest in Beyonce. Like
Understandable.
I have an anti-interest in Beyonce, honestly. I mean, and I guess the Beehive people won't be listening to your podcast, so I guess I'll be fine. Because it's not a good idea to say these things publicly because people like start doxing.
This is a point I want to make too, is like, if you think about any Black ideals who were outrageous, that, you know, I mean, there's not even that many that, even they're comparative or not. I mean, there's like Little Richard, there's Screaming Jay Hawkins. Yes. There's a few, I mean, you know, because the Blues Masters were outrageous just by the poverty and the desperation.
And George Clinton or Rick James, you know,
James Brown.
James Brown.
Hello.
I mean, but I think like James Brown was like, you know, not, I mean, to me, because James, like, because he was straight and because he, you know, it was a different
well,
thing.
in a manner of speaking, he was straight. He was bent on a lot of subjects other than where he put his dick, though.
He endorsed Nixon and his favorite drug of choice in the 80s when Reagan invited him over the White House. Cools dipped in PCP.
No, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love James Brown. I mean, James Brown is like super important. But I mean, people like George Clinton, or maybe because George Clinton's like visually
very important,
more outrageous for me, more important,
yeah.
More out. I mean, what George Clinton was doing in the set, just like for like, you know, 30 years, just the hair and the drag outfits, just everything. I mean,
Sly and the Family, Sly. Slide.
Oh, God.
I mean, in terms of like, Black radical sort of men, and Sun Ra is hugely important to me. I mean, just people who are like really, I mean, so I just
a few outrageous people in jazz as well, because I mean, especially just because of their heroin aesthetic, that then they were, I mean, Miles Davis, we could go there wherever.
I love Miles Davis.
Different periods in time, different drugs people were on for whatever reason.
Well, Miles Davis was also ethical about his born wealth. He grew up wealthy, and he didn't cater or bow down to what that meant. It was a fuck you. It was liberation. And he's like, you're not going to fucking push me around. Of course, the fact that it's not for me to judge this, but the fact that he kind of stayed in the closet the whole time, or at least publicly, and didn't really talk about his homosexuality is kind of interesting, considering how
or bisexuality. We don't really know. We know he was sucking dick, but we don't know.
Well, he died of pneumonia in the 80s at 63. We know what that fucking means. And it was kind of, well, that's a whole other subject.
I just want to give props to the Little Richard documentary, which is really fantastic. It's so good.
It was amazing. He is everything. He is everything. It's called I Am Everything.
He was so mistreated, so underappreciated, so underpaid, and so influential.
It's so radical. I mean, I just don't even understand how Little Richard could emerge from Macon, Georgia in the 1950s.
No shit.
People might say they don't understand how you could, how you could rise up from Mobile, Alabama in whatever century, decade.
Well, his inner war was pretty turbulent for that to happen. I mean, there was a lot of, he would just celebrate and be bold and break barriers, and then he would put the shackles back up, and it was just insane.
He loved to find Jesus. He found Jesus over and over.
How many times?
Then he'd lose him, and then he would find him again, and then he would lose him.
Hey, you know what? It's not that hard to find Jesus in a whorehouse because he hung around with prostitutes. Come on.
That's right.
Jesus did.
We love that.
Jesus was a gay drug dealer who hung around with prostitutes. I mean, you want to find him, that's where you go.
And certainly Little Richard was my favorite thing is to imagine with Little Richard, because the Beatles were so obsessed with him. I can't stand the Beatles actually, but they were obsessed with him, and I love the idea of imagining like Paul McCartney like just sucking him off, like in the either in Liverpool or when they went to Germany together.
Well, I hate the idea that the Beatles and the Rolling Stones didn't pay his rent for the rest of his fucking life because financial amnesia on these cocksucking rich rock stars is ever present everywhere. We know it every day of our lives. Hello.
Yeah, that's obscene. That's completely obscene. But I love the idea of imagining. I mean, of course they were. I mean, they were obsessed with, so of course they were like giving him head and like of course. So this is like my little fan fiction. But of course they were those little white boys.
Is there anybody on your list that you'd like to get head or give? I have to just ask or receive head from.
To receive head from.
We can talk about that later if you want. If you want to advertise, this could be Ashbook instead of Facebook.
I mean, there are many people that should be sucking my dick. Absolutely, and I'm sure
all in a line.
In a line, exactly.
Well, I am. Exactly. Do you know the name of Frosty the Snowman's girlfriend or boyfriend?
Frost. I don't know.
The snowblower.
Hello.
The snowblower. Okay.
I want to go back to just touch on this that we were talking about a little bit before about the homophobia, as Tim was talking about, in the Black male psyche. But at the same time, there is this undercurrent. There is this subgenre where drag accepted, where people like Little Richard, where on the DL has been accepted. There are subcultures within that are pretty outrageous and extremely talented. And things like Pose or Paris is Burning show how talented and outrageous actually within a subculture of the Black community existed. This thing that was so its own thing and so influential.
Well, we know that Little Richard was like a part of the Chitlin circuit when he was doing drag. I mean, Richard was absolutely doing drag before he kind of like, recorded Tutti Frutti and was like, became, this mainstream. I mean, with Escarita as well, who was also another performer who was on that kind of circuit. So there's always within the Chitlin circuit, or within the sort of vaudevillian kind of circuit, there was always like men performing in drag and all kinds of bisexuality. Bessie Smith was like, a lesbian. I mean, all those female blues singers were like, if not bisexual, predominantly lesbian. So, I mean, there's always been.
And by the way, can you blame a woman?
Well, of course. I mean, I think it's a really great idea if anyone could not have to deal with men sexually, that they should. If you have a choice, you really should probably choose not to have to deal with men. I don't have a choice, really. I do. I love men. I do. I love them.
I love them too, in their place. Of course, I love them in their place. We're not even talking about what place I think that is right now. By the way, Who designs your clothes? Do you design them?
I don't
Who do you
design
get your
them.
outfits from?
I was formerly, a thrift store goth, and then like I still got into sort of trash and
A
vaudeville.
thrift store goth.
A thrift store goth. Then it was a trash and vaudeville goth, and then in the need to elevate, I discovered Rick Owen, and I discovered that Rick.
So does he dress you? That's what I was thinking, because
he doesn't personally. No, I just somehow find money to buy this stuff. Like I've never met Rick.
well,
Owen.
why don't you contact the motherfucker rich enough to give you some free clothes?
That's a good idea. I mean,
Kimbra, hello, she's a model for. Have you modeled for him? Isn't that how you get free clothes?
I don't know how you get free clothes. I mean, Kimbra, I guess that's how.
You know what? You contact Kimbra and say, "Look, babe, I need some motherfucking free clothes. Why are you paying a rich fucking fashion designer to dress in his outfits when he could just get? What are they costing? Like $2.50 and charging $2,000? Give me a fucking break." Again, financial amnesia. I say call that motherfucker up. Not my kind of style, but it looks good on you, honey. Gorgeous.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, I've been obsessed with glam rock. Like, my where I grew up in San Francisco. I mean, I grew up in Alabama technically, but the people that I like that were my people in San Francisco were obsessed with like glam rock. We're obsessed with you. We're obsessed with Diamanda. And so I emerged from this place where goth and glam meet, and Rick is a great, especially with these shoulders. When he started doing these shoulders, I was just like,
Let's give a shout out. I think he needs to be contacted. I do not think it's fair you're paying a rich person to wear his clothes. I just don't.
I mean, I wouldn't say
right?
I wouldn't say a negative word about Rick.
I'm saying positively he should give you some free shit, motherfucker. That's all I'm saying.
And I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you at all.
If there was somebody who made clothes that I liked, I'd be on the phone right now going, "Excuse me, hello."
Yeah, I mean, in terms of someone who manifests themselves a lot through clothing, Rick has been really a big deal for me in the last 2 or 3 years. This is more of a recent thing. This is maybe I guess 2020.
Okay, you did come over in your full gear to my place the other day. But one of the most impressive things, besides the fact with your platforms, you were maybe 7 foot tall, was you were wearing these platforms that had clear plexiglass heels. And as I said to you, back in the 70s, they used to have live goldfish in those heels. So next time you come over, I expect a goldfish or two.
Yes. And these
Dead or alive.
These are Rick Owen. They're called, I'm actually wearing them right now. I'll take them off. These are called Kiss heels. So these are the shoes. I mean, anyway, this is audio only though. This isn't going to be video. But
right.
Anyway, these are the shoes that you're talking about. And I agree. There should be goldfish in the shoes.
Well, I think, for 10% of nothing, I will get on to him for you.
For 10% of nothing. But yeah, these shoes
I'm gonna be your fashion pimp.
They're actually called Kiss heels after the band Kiss. Anyway, which I love. I love him. I think he's kind of a genius with the way he's able to blend all this musical, sort of style from glam and goth into.
So so one of the recent things that you've done, which I thought was just absolutely gorgeous and beautiful, is with young, now renamed Hunter Helmsley, what is the name of that performance that I saw that I was just so in love with?
Well, the video, I think you're referring to the video, which is called Carrying, and that's from a larger piece called Funeral Doom Spiritual, which I did with Helena Ravinia Hunt Hendricks, the leader and founder of the transcendental black metal band Liturgy. Also, she's a brilliant philosopher. It was a real treat. One of the great collaborations of my.
Well, the music is great because it's very psycho-ambient and quite different. I mean, it occupies its own genre.
Yeah, no, completely. She completely has invented a different kind of black metal. Absolutely. It's very American. I mean, what I appreciate about her black metal is that she understands how different it is from the Scandinavian black metal and understands, this kind of, it's this weird, American optimism, strangely, that I think really works. I mean, I think she's interested in the Thoreau people, all those.
When you say black metal, that's not what the music sounds like. It sounds like black metal, but not meaning black metal music. It's almost like a philosophical aesthetic, which takes the music somewhere else. Because it's
but you're talking about Liturgy.
Before. I was talking about Liturgy, not my music, not my.
Well, I'm talking about what she has brought to your music.
I mean, yeah, I think that's a great. I love that record we did together. She, I think, really did add this different kind of vibe. I mean, because it's not a metal record. The record we made together at all. It's very much it's a doom it's a doom.
It's doom psycho ambient. It's a Negro Gothic doom spiritual psycho ambient experience.
Yeah, it's a funeral. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that I'm like kind of taking genres. I mean, the funeral doom genre is, you know, a particular subgenre of metal. You know, Black Sabbath, the song Black Sabbath is technically the first funeral doom song. But I mean, there's like a lot of other bands that are kind of like with these like sort of sludgy, dirty.
Well, the thing is, like doom is like, if you talk about like gospel or spiritual doom. I mean, most doom, and actually my problem with most doom is they don't leave the blues scale. I mean, the shit started with basically a blues scale slowing down, and it's like now, at least because you go to every town, there's a sludge doom band in every town. It's like I appreciate the slow tempi. I appreciate the complicated forms that are, you know, take a lot of focus. Can we leave the blues scale every now and then? Just
well,
like
you know what I've seen recently on YouTube, that, you know, that bastion of unnecessary bullshit where people you've never heard of and never will again have like 2 million followers. There's something that I'm going to name it clown doom, where they're dressed almost like clowns. I mean, very extreme, not goth, like it, right? Okay. Yeah. And then the music is really heavy, sometimes often fast. And I don't even know what the genre is. I'm just going to call it clown doom, clown metal. And I only say this because occasionally I need to research what's out there. You go to YouTube and it'll send you to things you never heard of, never want to hear again, but there'll be 15 of them in a row, different ones, all in the same subspecies with so many followers. And you're, how does clown metal, and I'm not talking about like Insane Clown Posse, I'm talking about the next step on from that, because they're much more extreme in their heinous costuming and even more extreme in the music. I don't even know what the genre is. I'm just saying I'm always ready for a new education.
I can't educate you about that because I don't know what.
Well, isn't heavy metal actually clown metal anyways? I mean, Ozzy Osbourne. I mean,
well, I mean, I became that.
I mean, one of the things.
I mean, Kiss is clown metal,
yeah, right? Exactly.
But you guys like know Sun though. You know Sun, the band. Of
course,
Sun.
yes.
I'm obsessed with. I mean, you're talking about like, you know, leaving the blues scale. I mean, they barely leave a single note.
Right.
But with the innovation though with them, because I've seen many of their shows live, is the volume.
Sure.
The sheer volume when you're and then when Attila is singing with them, it's taking this idea of drone, this very loud thing to a religious level that I think is really
to a physical level.
But it's also the low frequencies start creating these physical beats like a Alvin Lucier or something like that. It has a whole other impact that is it kind of almost, it seems almost intuitive. I know it's definitely calculated, but there's something you just kind of rolled what it sounded like. Speaking of Ms. Hendricks, because we used to talk quite a bit about Stockhausen together. Did you ever explore the much of the Lick series, since you're into opera, of Stockhausen's 7 operas?
I am not that interested in Stockhausen. I mean, he's interesting, certainly. I'm not so interested in him. I mean, I'm more. This sounds so kind of like boring conservative. I mean, I'm obsessed with Wagner. Like, I love the Wiesendank lieder, his songs, his operas, obviously, but his songs. I'm obsessed with like that kind of opera. Like Stockhausen's, like, I don't know. I find it ultimately a little boring. I mean, even like Schoenberg, I appreciate, but I'm like, I sort of like Berg, like what Alban Berg does with that Schoenbergian.
So you like romanticism more than modernism? Would you say that?
I do actually. I know it sounds like, I know it sounds so conservative and boring. You know, I love like Leontine singing Wagner or Jesse singing Wagner. I'm obsessed with like this Wagnerian kind of big sound.
The drama of it. And the drama of it.
And the drama of it, and the way that the drama meets the music and the text, the sort of the total experience of it. I mean, I think that in terms of like music that is theatrical, that's meant to kind of tell a story, I think that you kind of can't be him in the epicness of it. I mean, you know, we have to always acknowledge when we talk about him as anti-Semitism, which we don't endorse or condone, but he really made some extraordinary opera.
Speaking of which, what are some artists that politically have spoiled milk expiration date that doesn't really hold true, on the wrong side of history yet? Well, we just mentioned Wagner. Yet you absolutely love. I mean, when someone's political or personal life is really dissonant with, say,
or the rape allegations.
Or any of it.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, I feel like you can't say this anymore, but I do still enjoy Marilyn Manson, and he's now credibly accused of raping all kinds of people, and I don't know, we don't know
because he had the theatrics, he had the subject matter, he had the look. It was larger than life.
He was interested in
controversial.
Nietzsche. He was interested in sort of fascism, interested in politics. He was interested in glam rock and Bowie. I mean, I think
fashionism.
Fashionism, yeah, fashion.
Well, here's a better question. Is there anyone that who've really fucked up and did bad things that you can't get over? That you're like, I can't enjoy this art anymore because this person's behavior.
I mean, in Marilyn Manson.
So you go back and forth day to day.
No, it's both. I mean, it's a hard one for me because I love women and I love people who.
Well, and I love women that know how to fucking fight, take somebody's throat out, kick them in the fucking balls, hit them over the head with a frying pan, and then say, "You do that again, motherfucker, and you might die." Yeah, that's how I love women.
And so, but the other thing is too, I think these are allegations. I mean, I think this whole movement trying to believe people is really important, but these are also allegations that haven't been tested in court. I'm really conflicted about it. So I'm deeply conflicted.
You believe in due process if the system's not corrupt, you do.
But I mean, that's the thing. We know the system is corrupt, and we know people who do all kinds of things.
I believe that I wish we could now have fear of a female planet, but that's still a ways off. I don't know why. Manual training, psychological defense, physical self-defense. Women pick up arms against the other assholes that have arms. I'm not suggesting anything. Maybe just pick up your fucking left arm and give them a left hook. Just saying, that's the Lydian method of defense.
No, but I do think that there is a fear of a female planet to a certain extent. I mean, I think the manosphere.
Fear of a black planet, fear of a female planet, fear of a fucking planet that represents all the people on it. That's what there's fear of.
I do think the incel crowd and the manosphere represent a kind of anxiety that is about women empowering themselves now, and that I think is really super positive.
Well, that's why you and I, Lamar Gorgeous, are sin cells. The more they kill, the more we want to fuck them over, up, whatever. Just saying.
All of those things.
What's your next project?
All those things. I mean, my God. So I feel like we didn't answer a lot of the questions that you were because we tangent. So I apologize to anyone who wanted answers to those questions about how we got from Alabama to San Francisco and New York.
I mean, you know what?
Well, how much violence have you had to endure personally?
I mean, how much violence have I had?
Well, I mean, if you're, if I may, pretty flamboyant in your expression, and you're also, you're pretty proud, and you're not afraid to stand up for yourself as
or walk down the street
as the way people perceive you. Yeah. And but I could see how that would threaten some motherfuckers, and I'm curious if you've had,
or are you just so unique and weird that they just know not to fuck with you?
I mean, both
at this point,
both those things are true. I mean, I think there was a large part of my life when I was hyper vigilant about the vibe, because there was always like since I was a kid, there was always like, oh, you're like, I was running around crazy in Alabama, you know what I mean, like this, crazy, wearing crazy shit, and so there was always like a threat of like violence. I mean, but I suffered mostly under the threat of violence. I mean, there's only really, there was like, I guess there was like one time when like I was walking down the street and someone threw like a bottle at me, and then I like and I decided to run, not stay and fight. So but like I would say that I haven't been. I mean, sans being beaten up as a kid, which happened quite often.
Did you learn how to fight because of that?
I would no. I mean, I got pretty good at talking. Like at a certain point, I could talk my way out of a lot of situations.
And again, what is somebody picking on you is out of fear that they want to beat you down because they cannot accept that there's other possibilities outside of their own limited realm.
It was also desire to a lot of the boys who were like, also wanted me, and so there was like that thing that I understood early on and figured out how to manipulate. So I think that when I look back in my life, I don't look at it as like a life of bullying or surviving bullying. It was like about becoming tenacious, about like surviving and figuring out how to navigate survival. But like,
what my line is, Lamar Gorgeous, is you want to fight or you want to fuck. Either way, you're gonna get fucking hurt.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, there's no victim story really with my life. I've had a pretty privileged life because I've been running around kind of really unhinged for like a real long time, and I get to like fly to Europe and play shows, and I get to fly to Canada and play shows, and my next show, to answer your question, is at Wellesley College on February 9th, and it's a part of this Lorraine O'Grady retrospective I'm performing as sort of tribute to her, and it's part of this like all-day symposium that's connected to this retrospective. Of course, Lorraine O'Grady went to Wellesley College in Massachusetts, so that's my next show. And then I'm doing this new piece called Bionic Dicks and Hyperreal Niggas, a post-human and ancient sci-fi aching. I'm doing that in Austin, Texas on February 18th. And that's part of the Outsider Festival. And that's happening at the Vortex. The theater is called the Vortex Theater in Austin, Texas. I perform there a lot, and it's crazy. I mean, I have a fear of going to the South, but I've been to Austin many times, and it goes very well. I mean, that's the thing that when I let go of hypervigilance, what I've learned is that people like when I'm walking down the street, people like talk to me. They're like, you look great. Like, tell me about your outfit, or like, I love your fit. I mean, like I kind of, when I let go of like the sort of the fear that people were gonna like do something to me, I get more love than anything on the street now.
Well, when you open up and you put out into the universe or whatever, something that is open, things do come back.
Well, I'm a love person, and ultimately, I'm just I just am about love, and so I'm very much a people person, and I love people.
Also, comedy can deflect a lot of aggro. That's
completely. Yeah, I am hilarious when I want to be. I'm very serious, but I'm like really funny. So I mean, I'm living like a great life. Like I really, I can't. I'm not bought and sold by any corporate entity.
How do you get your shows? How do you book a lot of your shows? Do you have a booking agent?
I have when I basically get invited. So I get emails from people and they invite me to things. And so usually, when I like my last festival in Europe, for example, I was invited to play this festival in The Hague. And then I have this woman who, so then I had that show, and then someone invited me to do the show in Berlin the week after that. And so then after that, I have this woman who helps me book, sort of fill out my European gigs. And so there's a woman.
That's how we have to do it.
Yeah, and so then so basically it's all, I don't have an agent or anything. I don't have a label. I don't have a gallery. I do a lot of stuff in the art world, and I don't have a gallery. I don't have any infrastructure really beyond the infrastructure that
most of us here. But I want to also mention, because there was a great article today, and I'm going to send it to you because you're mentioned in it, because you're the next part of Michelle Handelman's 4-part series that she made. I was in the first part, you're in the next part, which is now up at the Signs and Symbol Gallery on the Lower East Side for a couple more weeks. And it makes sense to me, even though we only recently met, that we are now back-to-back bookends with Michelle Handelman's incredible art. And this new series she's doing is totally something completely original. A lot of her films have been incredible, and this is really going to go into another dimension. That would be me.
I mean, I love your section. What she's done with you in that collaboration is beautiful. I love the shooting black and white, because I make my own cinema as well, and I always shoot in black and white my own work. And so I'm super excited to work with her. I mean, she's a master filmmaker. Obviously, I have a lot. I mean, I consider myself a filmmaker as well, but I have a lot to learn, I think, still as a filmmaker. So I'm super excited to work with her and like just learn everything that she has to.
Do you know when the next part of Michelle Handelman's series is going to start with you?
We're on hold right now because she's trying, all the other people who are part of the collaboration, she's trying to line them up because she wants to film us all like, consecutive days. And so that's to be determined, but it's happening, this year, probably in the next like 6 months.
It's going to be fantastic.
And it's good, super fantastic, super excited about that. And I have like a piece that I'm doing at Impact in the first week of May, Impact in Troy, New York. And then I'm doing a show at the Bayview Opera House in San Francisco in June. Stay tuned for that. You can look on my website and find information about it.
We're going to be looking on the website. It was a real pleasure talking to you.
Really was all mine.
Gorgeous Lamar, fantastic pianist, artist, painter, composer, operatic singer, just a general all-around, multi-dimensional freak of nature in the highest of compliments, I can say. Very happy to have you here on the Lydia Spin. I'm Lydia Lunch with Tim Dahl.
Thank you for doing this.
Much.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun. Always so much fun, Lydia.